Good morning. I'm Robert Litvak, Senior Vice President of the Wilson Center. I welcome all of you to this institution. Please continue to enjoy breakfast as we launch the program. A special thanks to our co-hosts, the EU delegation, particularly Mary Kavanagh. We are also honored to welcome our distinguished speakers, Robert Jan Smits from the European Commission and Lisa Brodey from the Department of State. The Wilson Center was created by an act of Congress to serve as a bridge between academia and public policy. President Wilson was president of Princeton, had a PhD. So to memorialize him, Congress created this living memorial to bridge between academia and other professions and public policy. The program under whose auspices today's event is held within the Wilson Center, the Science, Technology, Innovation Program, is serving as an important bridge in its own right, bridging between the scientific technical community and the public policy community to bring innovation and development for all of the objectives that this European initiative has of improving society, increasing the knowledge base on important science issues. So we're delighted to be co-hosting today's event. It really is part of the core mission of this institution. I salute Anne and Meg King, Eleanor Pavels, the team on STIP who've made today, who for their own work and for making today possible. In 2017, the 10th President of Finland, Nobel Peace Prize laureate and United Nations diplomat, Matti Ahtisaari, gave the keynote speech to a symposium on European security and global perspectives. That was one of a host of initiatives that we have that symbolizes the strong kind of link between the Wilson Center as a locus of public policy research in America and European institutions, and both governmental and academic. In a similar vein, in 2016, Congresswoman Jane Harman, our President and CEO, welcomed Baroness Catherine Ashton for a conversation on the precipitating factors driving Brexit, and she'll return next month. She's a distinguished fellow at the Wilson Center, and we're honored to have her affiliation. One of our current fellows, Robin Quinville's on loan to us from the State Department. We thank the State for lending her to us this year. She's going on to bigger and better things, greater things. She's going to be our Deputy Chief of Mission in Embassy Berlin, and we're thrilled to have her with us. And the Science, Technology, and Innovation Program, which I alluded to, has been actively participating in the bilateral research cooperation with the European Union since 2014. Under the 7th Framework Program, Eleanor Pavels, Director of the Anticipatory Intelligence Lab, led our participation in Synergene, a project which promotes responsible research and innovation in genomics and synthetic biology. Dr. Ann Bowser, Director of Innovation, one of our superstars at the Wilson Center, to whom I'm going to turn the microphone over in a moment, leads our participation in Bilat 4.0, a Horizon 2020 project which aims to support bilateral science and technology cooperation, and sponsored this event. So with that, let me turn the microphone over to Ann, who will introduce our program.
Good morning. Thank you for that very nice introduction. It's fantastic to see so many people here for an 8 o'clock a.m. event. So once again, welcome. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Robert Jan Smits is Director General of DG Research and Innovation at the European Commission. In this capacity, he is responsible for defining and implementing the EU policy programs in the field of research and innovation with an average annual budget of €8 million. Mr. Smit was one of the main architects and negotiators of Horizon 2020, the 80 billion EU program for science and innovation between 2014 and 2020. Mr. Smits has also been instrumental in the development of several policy initiatives in the field of European science and innovation, such as the European Research Council, the European Roadmap for Large-Scale Facilities, Public-Private Partnerships in Research, the Innovation Union, and the European Research Area. Mr. Smits is chairing several high-level commitments, such as European Research Area Committee, the Steering Committee of the ERC Executive Agency, and the Executive Committee of GEO. We welcome him to the stage.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and it's really great to be back here in Washington after quite a number of years. I have not been here. And it is also good to see so many friends who have only gotten younger, or it's perhaps because I've gotten older and grayer, so we're really fantastic to be here. Special word of thanks, of course, to the Wilson Center for hosting us here, to the BILAT program, and of course to our delegation, our mission, Mary Kavanagh and her team for organizing this. And it's a special day, because today we are announcing the last, series of calls on the Horizon 2020, one of the biggest programs for science innovation in the world. And the fact that we are doing this here in Washington, at the same time we're doing it in other places across the globe, shows our commitment to science and innovation cooperation with our US colleagues. We share so many same values, we share in history together, we share lots of friendship and partnerships, and you are for us the most natural and logical partner when it comes to working in the field of science and innovation. And that's why I'm very delighted to be here with you, to take you through our plans for the next 3 years. Because Horizon 2020, it was already mentioned, 80 billion euro for science and innovation. But we have not spent it all. We have at the moment still 30 billion to go. And that's why I'm here, to announce the 30 billion, but also to encourage US scientists and innovators to be part of this excitement, to join in, work with European colleagues, to extend the frontiers of knowledge and to find solutions for the grand societal challenges in numerous areas, from the marine fields all the way to environmental, renewable energies, climate change, you name it. There's so much going on at the moment in Horizon 2020, and we feel that American scientists and innovators must be part of this excitement for the benefit of our citizens, of our societies, and our planet. So just let me take you through the slides. I think first of all, this slide indicates the size of the program and how it has grown over the years. I remember when I started a long time ago, the annual budget of the European science budget was only something, a couple of billion. But you've seen it over the years, it has grown, and at the moment it's around 8 to 10 billion per year. And that means that at political level, they give more and more attention to science innovation, because science and innovation is the only tool we have to strengthen our competitiveness and to find solutions for the grand societal challenges. So Horizon 2020 is this budget, is this program of around 80 billion euro, some 10 billion euro per year, aimed at boosting science and innovation by putting the best brains of Europe and the world together. You see that the United States is a special friend, a special ally. As a matter of fact, we signed in 1998 an S&T agreement, and that means that next year we'll be celebrating 20 years of cooperation in the field of science and innovation. I said already to Mary Kavanagh, we need to throw a big party to really celebrate this here in Washington and perhaps at the same time in Brussels. Now, if you look at participants from outside Europe in our program, the United States is number one. So we are open to do business with the whole world. So we have participants from almost all countries in the world in our project, in our programs. But the number one participant from outside Europe is the United States. And again, this is all about, you know, the ties and the links which have been established over so many years. And it's about the fact that we share so many values and traditions and history together. If you look at the US participation in the last 10 years, you see very clearly that we have had over 1,000 participants in the last framework program and the current one. And these are notably coming from universities, from US universities. Of course, companies are also there. We have also NGOs participating in our research and innovation programs. And we can only hope one thing is that there is much more to come. In order to boost this cooperation between US and European scientists and innovators, we have different mechanisms. And a couple of days ago at the State Department, we discussed indeed new ways to further boost the cooperation. Give an example with the NIH. We have an arrangement whereby any European who participates in an NIH program got funding, and any American who participates in the European medical research programs get funding, so it's a kind of a mutual opening. With the ERC, which are our most prestigious grants we give, we have worked out an arrangement with the National Science Foundation in which through the programs of the National Science Foundation, we are giving top scholars and scientists the possibility to spend some time in Europe at grant holders of the European Research Council. We have up to date some 200 US senior scientists who went through this arrangement with the NSF to Europe. As a matter of fact, the ERC, and I think most of you from the academic community are familiar with it, these are very prestigious grants. But what is interesting is that if you hold such a grant, you can stay for 50% at your home organization. So that means that as an American scientist here at the university, he or she can still spend 50% of her and his time in the United States and the other 50% in Europe. And it's a fantastic arrangement, and I think we should more and more promote that for the sake of cooperation. We are at the moment looking at the last 3 years of Horizon 2020. My colleagues in the United States are always a little bit jealous of Europe because we have a 7-year program. Horizon 2020 is a 7-year program, so I don't have to go to the Hill like you have to go every month, week, or year to get then the budget for the last year. I have to negotiate with the European Parliament and the member states for quite an intensive period of a year and a half, but then they leave me alone for 7 years. And that is just great, and I can highly recommend that to your administration here. Go for that European solution, because also in the field of science and innovation, a level of continuity is so important. And certainly if you want to work together across the globe, if you want to have government-to-government relations or cooperation in science fields, it is important that you can take this long-term perspective. Now, Horizon 2020 was evaluated at midterm, so last year, by a very senior group of people. And they came to very interesting conclusions. I think, first of all, they say it's an amazing program, which is highly attractive, very competitive, but the only problem is it does not have enough funding. Our success rate has gone down to something like 14%. And that shows that, you know, there are so many good ideas of scientists and innovators in Europe who want to work together with their colleagues from across the globe, but we just do not have enough money. Secondly, the program is offering real value for money. If you see the number of scientists and innovators who say, thanks to this program, we have been able to extend the frontiers of knowledge, we have been able to bring products to the market, it's quite impressive. More than 80% of our beneficiaries, of our participants say, thanks to this program, we were able to do the things we wanted to do. And it's a clear program of European added value because it brings together scientists and innovators from different European countries who then work in full partnership to extend the frontiers of knowledge. And it's a big enterprise. If you look at the figures here, 65,000 participants, 15,000 grant agreements. So it's really a very big endeavor which we are doing. Now, I mentioned we are entering the last 3 years of Horizon 2020, still some 30 billion to go. And we are going to focus that on a number of areas. I think, first of all, very much in line with the Sustainable Development Goals and the objectives we all took at COP21, we're going to deploy a lot of funds in order to meet those objectives. That's a commitment we took globally, and we want to stick to that commitment. So we will really put our money where our mouth is and going to spend big-time money on issues like decarbonization of our economy. Secondly, digitization of our society is a huge issue. Digitization of our industry, big issue, our manufacturing base, also in the United States. So also there, we're going to invest billions of euros to indeed boost the introduction of digital technologies in our industry, in our health service, in our education system. And then, last but not least, we are going to put a lot of effort on international cooperation. That means cooperation with countries outside the European Union. For a very simple reason. The challenges which you are facing are so complex that, you know, even scientists from the United States will not be able to do it by themselves. We need these global partnerships, we need this global cooperation really to work to find solutions. And I was yesterday and the day before yesterday at the Earth Observation Summit here, which brought together some 700 people, hosted by NOAA. And there you see it. When the hurricane struck your country, we from Europe were able to deploy very quickly our satellite pixels, our data, to help you to trace the hurricane and to see where you needed to take dedicated measures. And we made it available. People work day and night to make these pixels available to help you guys out. And I think that shows once again that we need each other, because these effects of climate change are there to stay. And it's going to be more and more. So we need to work together in partnership. And you are, for us, a natural partner. Let me come to 3, say, mottos which we have for our 30 billion still to go. It's all about openness. We take in Europe quite an open approach. And therefore we say the leitmotif is open innovation, it's open science and open to the world. There's not going to be a fortress Europe or Europe first. There's going to be cooperation and openness, because we know that that will bring the solutions for mankind. We are going to do much more in the field of open innovation. We are creating an interesting new scheme for startups in order to allow them not only to get off the ground, but also to do scale up, bring them in touch with venture capitalists. We're going to build a European open science cloud, where we want to build, to bring the different, say, thematic science clouds together, federate them, link them up. And as I mentioned, we want to do business with the rest of the world. We have identified some 30 international flagships where we really would like to work with partners from across the globe to address the grand societal challenges. With the United States, and we discussed it in our meetings here at the State Department, we have an all-Atlantic research alliance. It's a very interesting partnership. We, of course, are with you in mission innovation. I really hope that the United States will continue with mission innovation. That's the energy flagship. There is a big initiative on human data storage for personalized medicine, with also the Canadians involved. We have a lot of flagships ongoing and planned for global cooperation. And I can only wish one thing, is that you join us in these partnerships, in these global endeavors. Now, what are the areas where we have identified notably challenges and opportunities for cooperation with our US colleagues and innovators? I think first of all, I already mentioned it, the marine area and the Arctic area, a big also political priority in your country. There we are launching several calls and activities to map seabeds, to look at climate change in the Arctic, and we really would like to welcome US participants. In the field of health, I mentioned already the first-class cooperation with the NIH. I mentioned personalized medicine, something where we want to do more. Transport, road automation, I think very familiar to all of you here as well. Aviation, green and safe aviation systems. In the field of energy, renewable fuels is going to be a big topic where we see lots of potential for cooperation. And last but not least, nano safety. But I could have mentioned many more topics where we could cooperate, ranging from air pollution, digital transformation of health, satellite data. So there are so many opportunities for our scientists and innovators to work together. At the State Department, when we had our joint committee meeting a couple of days ago, one thing became clear. We don't want to have top-down decisions about, these are the areas in which our scientists and innovators have to work together. Our role from the administration is to make sure that there are no bottlenecks which stand in the way of cooperation, that we are facilitators, that the scientists and innovators can do their things. But that being said, there will be always some strategic priorities where we feel things need to be done. The Arctic is a nice example. I think it was John Kelly who here organized in the White House this Arctic Summit for the first time. This is a top-down area where politicians say we need to bring the best scientists together to work. So it will always be a combination of bottom-up and top-down. Examples of our excellent cooperation, I mentioned already automated vehicles. We are continuing there. We are going to organize a 30 million euro call in 2019. Nano safety, a big call of around 28 million in 2018. So a lot of money available for this future cooperation, notably with our American colleagues. Success stories, there are many. I chose 2. Ebola, and that's something which I witnessed myself. I was called in October 2014 to an emergency meeting at WHO, not because I'm a medical doctor, I know nothing of that field, but because I had money, and a lot of money. And this was an emergency meeting in a stuffy room in Geneva, but the people who were there were really the decision makers from the private sector. GlaxoSmithKline, Johnson & Johnson, J&J was there, Novartis was there, NIH was there, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So the people who were there were the ones who hold the purse, but also the top scientists. And what I learned at that was that the situation was really getting out of hand. The WHO was heavily criticized for not having reacted promptly, and there was a desperate plea from Margaret Chan, the Director General of WHO, do something, get together, work on a medication. Within 4 months' time, we liberated a couple of million euro. We put a public-private partnership together, and within a couple of months, we started clinical trials. And now today, 1.6 million vaccines are stockpiled. Because the Ebola virus is not in the news anymore, but it's hiding in the jungle, and I can tell you, when we expect it least, it will strike again. So thanks to this global cooperation with our American counterparts, with your companies, we're able to address this issue big time. I learned a lot also for Europe. Something which I discovered during that period was, first of all, how ill-prepared we were for these type of emergencies from the research point of view. The public health point of view was okay, but from the research point of view, we really needed a global initiative where we can overnight mobilize the top scientists in the medical field when there's an epidemic outbreak. And we are setting that up. It's called GLOPR, and we hope that the US will join that shortly. But I also discovered that we have to look again at vaccine production. I think it's not very healthy that vaccine production is almost totally in the hands of the private sector. And that's another thing which I have learned from that crisis. We are far too dependent on that. But that's something on which I would not dwell. You see, already start carried away by the experience we had then. The other success story which we had was, of course, the transatlantic cooperation. We're together, notably with NOAA in your country, but also your universities. First-class work is doing to develop an integrated observing system for the Atlantic oceans. So a lot of things to do, a lot of possibilities still to partner and to work together. And I have only one request: go for it. Go for it. We are open for business. They're also going for it in the kitchen. I think they probably thought the message was for them, you know, go for it. We have enormous possibilities for working together. We share the same values. We have so much to offer one another. So let's really take this opportunity of the last 3 years of Horizon 2020 to join forces and to let our scientists and innovators work together for the sake of our societies and for the sake of our planet. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. As we prepare for our next speaker, please get ready for mini quiche to be served. A note, some of these do have shellfish, so if you would prefer to have another variety, please just let our butlers know. And now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Lisa Brodey. She is the Director of the Office for Science and Technology Cooperation at the U.S. State Department. Her office fosters bilateral relations and scientific diplomacy in basic science, emerging trends in science and technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. She and her staff engage with science and technology experts in the United States to facilitate partnerships and robust dialogue with their counterparts throughout the world, in government, the private sector, universities, and non-government organizations. Ms. Brodey is a Foreign Service Officer with over 20 years of experience in international diplomacy. She has worked extensively with the global environment, science, technology, and health community, and served for 6 years with the U.S. Multilateral Mission in Geneva, Switzerland. She was a principal negotiator in creating the global framework for climate services and, most recently, supervised U.S. teams engaging with the World Health Organization, the Human Rights Council, and the International Labor Organization. Ms. Brodey also served in U.S. embassies in Norway, Italy, Ethiopia, and Kosovo. Prior to joining the Foreign Service, Ms. Brodey was a documentary and news producer in Seattle. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I want to thank DG Smits, of course, and his team, with a special shout out for Mary Kavanaugh here, as well as the Woodrow Wilson Center for hosting us. This is really quite an honor. I want to also thank DG Smits for coming to Washington this week with his delegation and say how excited we are for the next phase of the Horizon 2020 implementation. The EU is one of our closest partners for collaborating on numerous 21st century issues, from international security to humanitarian efforts, and of course, why we're here, science, technology, and innovation. The United States and Europe represent two of the world's largest scientific enterprises. Between the two of us, we spend nearly $800 billion annually on research and development. And this includes tens of billions of dollars in transatlantic investment in infrastructure, personnel, and of course, fundamental research. But it wasn't always this way. DG Smits mentioned our shared history and values. And while science and shared research has been the cornerstone of our collaboration since our country was founded, our friends across the Atlantic made us earn our stripes. While you're all enjoying your quiche, I think I'm going to tell you a little story. Has anyone heard this Thomas Jefferson moose story? I think it's worth sharing because it really does illustrate the ways in which we all grew in our relationship. So it goes like this. Most of America's founding fathers, with the exception of Benjamin Franklin, were very young as they were creating our nation. Madison, Monroe, Hamilton, Lafayette, and Burr were all between the ages of 18 and 25 at the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The intellectuals in Europe were wondering why we had been unable to produce another elder statesman like Benjamin Franklin. And so a French nobleman, Count Georges-Louis Leclerc-Buffon, if I got that right, had a theory that this was because of environmental factors in America. So based on reports that he had read, he decided America was too swampy, and it had too recently risen from the ocean for any creatures to compete with those on the drier, harder climate of Europe, you know, that tried and tested Europe. He went on to claim that animals and plants in America were therefore smaller and weak and less diverse. So America's ambassador to France at that time, Thomas Jefferson, did not take kindly to these assertions, and he became determined through science and research to provide hard evidence and prove Buffon wrong. That was his goal. So over the next few years, Jefferson had colleagues back in the States capture precise measurements for any number of creatures and plants, capturing every detail and reporting back to him in France. So one night, Jefferson had dinner with Buffon, and somehow someone mentioned a moose. Well, Buffon decided that it was impossible for a creature of such stature as it was described to exist in the New World, and he told Jefferson that someone must have been describing a reindeer and exaggerating. You can guess what happened next. Jefferson, again, did not take too kindly to this claim, and as the story goes, he told Buffon a reindeer could walk under the belly of a moose. Jefferson became obsessed again with finding a moose from America and sending it to Buffon, constantly writing back to America and begging his colleagues to kill a moose and ship it over the Atlantic. Finally, a moose was killed. 14 days dragged through the snow to be shipped across the Atlantic. Took a few months for that voyage. And when delivered to Buffon, was told by Jefferson, I have seen some of them which would have weighed 5 or 6 times the amount of this moose. This story is great because it shows how far we have come in our science and technology collaboration. Jefferson wanted to impress our European allies, and he knew the way to do that was through hard, scientific, indisputable evidence. Since that time, we have never stopped cooperating with Europe. And through the 20th century, the pace of our collaboration led to many of the world's greatest discoveries, from atomic sciences and aerospace to medicine and agriculture. The US-EU implementing arrangement on science and technology is a fantastic example of the extraordinary cooperation we share with the European Union in these areas. Agreements like these allow the US and EU scientists and researchers to work side by side every day, tackling modern issues that know no boundaries. We heard so many from DG Smits, but infectious disease, food safety, alternative energy, and air quality, to name a few. Now, some 200 plus years since a decaying moose made its way across the ocean, this transatlantic relationship helps facilitate one of the most productive scientific exchanges in the world. For example, last year, a team of Belgian scientists funded by the European Research Council discovered 7 exoplanets in the habitable zone of a single star using NASA's Spitzer Space Telescope. And each of the 2017 Nobel Prizes for physics, medicine, and chemistry were only made possible through transatlantic collaboration, whether through the direct exchange of scientific personnel or the development of large research infrastructures. Additionally, every year, tens of thousands of European researchers partner with Americans on thousands of federally supported projects, both in the United States and in the European Union. Earlier this week, Director General Smits joined Acting Assistant Secretary of State Judy Garber to review our scientific relationship during the 2017 US-EU Joint Consultative Group meeting in Science and Technology. During the meeting, each side reaffirmed their commitment to continuing and expanding this partnership. We share with the European Union a desire to make it as easy as possible to continue driving the engine of discovery by reducing barriers to collaboration. And we're so pleased that Director General Smits has chosen to launch the 2018-2020 work program for Horizon 2020 here in the United States. At the meeting earlier this week, we also agreed to work harder to look beyond ways to just work together in parallel, but pursue deeper integration of our scientific activities. Moving forward, we are hopeful that Horizon 2020's successor will also continue the progress that the EU has made under its present program and make the 9th Framework Program its most open research program yet. So, Director General, how fortunate we are and feel to have such a strong partner. And we feel that partnership very strongly now with the European Union, one that shares our core scientific values of fundamental curiosity, openness, transparency, and accountability. I look forward to the 2018-2020 work program. I'm sure it will be a huge success and garner a lot of collaboration between across the Atlantic, and the exciting ways we can collaborate in the future. And to think, it all started with a dead moose. So, thank you very much.
Thank you for that fantastic counterpart. And now I would like to invite both of our distinguished speakers back up for a round of moderated questions and a group discussion. And we'll be happy to take questions from the audience to start.
It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Bhavik Atiba. I'm chairman of the board for Society for Brain Mapping, so obviously I have a great interest in neuroscience. So in this area, obviously there's an area of cooperation between European Union and US for brain research. I wanted to know your kind of thoughts on future collaboration, future funding, and kind of what's the role of organizations like us to make that integration more rapidly?
Well, we have launched a couple of years ago a big initiative, a €1 billion initiative, Mapping the Brain. You're very much familiar with that. But again, it shows that even this multi-billion European endeavor needs to be linked to, of course, what you are doing in the United States. And there are already exchanges taking place between the scientists and the innovators. And I think we agreed at our meeting earlier on that this will be one of the key areas on which we'll focus. So if you look at the protocol, the conclusions we agreed upon when we had our joint committee meeting, United States, Europe on Science and Innovation Cooperation, the brain is mentioned as one of the top priorities. And that means that you have to come over quickly to Brussels for a dedicated meeting because we are doing a lot of work on not only mapping the brain, we're also doing a lot of work on the neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. There's a lot of things going on in that area as well, and we should see how we can indeed align our agendas and bring the scientists and innovators together. In that context, and I briefly mentioned it to you before the breakfast meeting, there's a fascinating initiative launched by Chan Zuckerberg, the Human Atlas, Cell Atlas project. It's about mapping the human cells in our bodies. And that is something which also we could link very closely to the BRAIN project. So we are open for business and invite you to come to Brussels.
Absolutely.
Don't wait too long.
Fantastic, thank you.
I just want to confirm that. And I think it's important to remember that health remains a very strong priority for the United States, even going into the fiscal year 19 planning. So it's very important. We have incredible collaboration on brain and health in general with the EU, and that will continue.
Great, thank you.
There's so many.
Thank you very much. My name is Naomi Webber, and I work with a number of US universities. Could you talk a bit more about the mechanisms that US researchers can use to collaborate on 2020?
Well, you can join our call for proposals. There's always a requirement, except for the ERC, that there should always be 3 European scientists and then an American scientist, for instance. Normally, the US scientists have to bring their own funding along, but if we really consider that the US know-how is essential for the project, we can finance it. In the field of health, as I mentioned, we have a special arrangements with the NIH, where each American scientist who joins our medical research program gets automatically funding because the NIH is funding all European medical scientists. So the mechanisms are, I think, quite easy and straightforward. There was quite a lot of hassle in the past about our grant agreement. Because even if you were not a partner getting money into a European project, you still have to sign a grant agreement. Now we abolished that. That means that if you're now the US participant who brings his own funding, you don't have to sign a grant agreement. If you get money from us, of course, it's logical that you have to sign a grant agreement, and that is, that's part of the game. So I think even for those who are not getting grant money from Brussels, we have been able to make the process easier, leaner, and simpler. And I think this will lead to, an increase of our cooperation.
It's certainly our goal is to increase cooperation and to reduce the barriers to participation as much as possible. And as we work with the interagency community and universities, and of course our colleagues, we will keep working towards a smoothly facilitated participation process.
I would add that the BILAT 4.0 project has published a number of resources aiming to help US researchers understand how to cooperate with our European counterparts. I'm also going to take advantage of my role as a moderator to ask the third question. It is GeoWeek. I'm curious as to how the two of you see the US and the European Union cooperating under the auspices of GEO.
Well, GEO, for those who are not familiar with it, is a system whereby at international global level, Russians, Americans, Chinese, South Koreans, Europeans share data on Earth observation. And these are data which are made interoperable, which are shared. I was, in the last year, the GEO lead chair, and the main point on the agenda for me was, first of all, to focus much more on the end user. to deploy all these data which we have gathered really for the benefits of our industry, our society. And notably the hurricane season showed how important it is that we deploy these data and not just generate them. Secondly, my priority was to have more engagement with the commercial sector. So we had a fantastic workshop yesterday and again this morning with representatives from the commercial sector to see how these data can be used for business models, business processes. And the last thing is to boost communication on Earth observation to the citizen, because not many people know why we're putting so much money into Earth observation, but we need to indeed show and demonstrate to the citizen why we are investing these funds. The cooperation with the US, and notably with NOAA, is first class on Earth observation. The one who takes over for me as lead co-chair as of today is Stephen Volz from NOAA. So, and we had, just an amazing cooperation. He's a fantastic guy, and I know that Geo will be in good hands when he takes over today.
Fantastic.
In fact, while I am in the science directorate, our office does not actually cover space, but that said, I have spent many years in Geneva, where Geo is based. Geo is an incredible resource, and with our focus now on not only prosperity, but also on security, I want to thank you for the Copernicus information that was available and so useful during the hurricanes, because it allowed our first responders to actually get the resources on the ground. And we couldn't have done that because we didn't have that ability to penetrate all the layers of clouds and et cetera that Copernicus had. And it's a testament to our good relationship that we were able to access that. So GEO is an amazing resource on any number of areas, and we have good collaboration there.
Thank you, and I'll take a next question from our guests.
Yes, so Dr. Smits. I'm Richard Durman from Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia. And you talked about global health, and some of us in the room, I suspect, have been doing a lot of work in this arena in under-resourced countries with partners in Europe. Is the opportunity, for example, in addressing the leading cause of death in women and babies in Africa, in India, with partners in Europe, is that a possibility for application under Horizon 2020?
Yes and no. We are not so much with Horizon 2020 a capacity building program. We are a program to link the best brains together to find solutions for societal problems. But that being said, we have a lot of activities with Africa. As a matter of fact, we have a big program in which we do clinical trials together with our African countries on HIV, malaria, tuberculosis. But that's very much not aimed at capacity building in those countries, but it's very much to link the best brains from these countries to our best brains in order to extend the frontiers of knowledge. So that's why I say yes and no. If the aim is capacity building in Africa, that's not our business. If you say is to link up the best brains from Africa with our best brains, then we're talking business.
A question from this side of the room, perhaps?
Hi, it's Giulio Busolini from the Embassy of Italy, one of the science attaché. I'm very pleased to have you here again. I mean, and I think your words to say that US is our natural partners, I think is important to say very loud. My question is about the European Innovation Council. If you can say about this pilot that is somehow in the pipeline of the also new upcoming work program will be very interesting for us, because I think it's another link that could be a transversal link and we try to leverage on our side. Thanks a lot.
I did not make my story complete when I talked about the interim evaluation of Horizon 2020. First class program, European added value, not enough money. But there were two other things which were mentioned as recommendation where we need to do more. One is to bring science closer to the citizen. And that's why we're going to launch under the next program a number of missions or moonshots. So we are currently in the process of identifying them. Mapping the brain is a moonshot. Let me be clear about it. Building the quantum computer is a moonshot. So we are going to identify for the next program a number of moonshots, not top-down, but with society. And then I not only talk about scientists and innovators, but talk about consumer organizations, NGO, to identify topics where society wants science and innovation to provide solutions. That's one thing. And the second thing, which the midterm evaluation brought forward, was that we have not been given enough support to the young startup companies who often are in the field of disruptive innovation, and we need to do more to help those to get off the ground and to scale off. And that's why when we are here this week with my colleagues who went to DARPA to look into that, because that's a fantastic mechanism of indeed funding the crazy ideas, the out-of-the-box thinking. And it was very grateful to the colleagues at DARPA who opened their doors and showed us how they are doing things. That's still part of our portfolio which is missing, and that's what we're going to set up, the European Innovation Council, exactly for that purpose. The crazy ideas, the out-of-the-box thinkers, the disruptive innovators who create the complete new markets. And you guys have been very good in that here in the United States, because we look at the Googles, the Amazons, they all came out of your, say, disruptive innovators' creativity. Where we had them in Europe, they often did not generate their big gains in Europe and the United States. Skype is a European invention, but made big in the United States. For my country, the Netherlands, came Booking.com. Well, it went to the United States to make the big bucks over there. So we need to do more, not only to get those innovators with disruptive ideas supported, but also to allow them to scale up and to roll out technology. And that's the European Innovation Council.
Next question.
Johannes Muhl from the Texas A&M University System. And I wanted to ask a little bit more about, you identified areas that you were looking to have US, EU cooperation, and one of those areas was automated vehicles. That's something that my university is investing a lot of money in right now. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what you're looking for in that area.
Well, this is, of course, the big, I think, change which we're going to see in our transportation system, the automatic driving. But that's about, the software, the technology, the liability, the standards. So there will be a lot of pre-normative research being done on it. It's not so much, I think, the technology. It is much more the standards and the deployment of the technology. We have identified that as an area where we really would like to see our American counterparts, our universities, and your university as well join in. So this is one of the areas. So it's quite, we take it from quite an holistic angle. It's even taking into consideration issues like public perception and looking into the socio-economic dimension, because a hell of a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, these truck drivers, let's be clear. So we need to look into this automatic vehicle which are going to come our way, whether we like it or not, to look at it in a holistic way. So it's technology, standardization, liability issues, but also public acceptance. So join in.
My name is Nam Nguyen. I'm a cancer researcher. And we have about 70, 80 cancer institutions in Europe who partner with us for research. I have two questions. Number one is, what is the priority for the European Union for cancer research? Is it to receive a priority for funding? Is it genomic, proteomic, translational research, clinical research? And the number two question is, how do you review, what the mechanism of review of those grant proposal? Is it similar to the NIH or is it different?
Well, with regards to the review, we use international peer review. So we ask the best experts from across the globe to look at the proposal. So from that point of view, our system is not different from NIH. With regards to medical research, a lot of emphasis on the personalized medicine and a lot of translational research. I think this is at the moment a big issue, including diagnostic tools. That's also something which we're going to deploy a lot of funds, early diagnostic tools. So again, the medical program is our biggest program. They have, out of the 80 billion, 10 billion. And you have already relationships or partnerships, I heard, with European counterparts. So continue to do so and use our program to further strengthen these partnerships and cooperation.
Lea, please.
Dr. Lea Shanley. I'm the co-executive director of the South Big Data Innovation Hub. We're funded by the National Science Foundation and one of a network of 4 hubs around the country. We're going to be going to a meeting in Paris, outside of Paris, for the European Union's Big Data Value Association meeting, bringing our researchers over there to begin to build bridges between their lighthouse projects. Where do you see the opportunities in big data research for joint US-EU cooperation?
I think it's first of all a challenge, I think, for all our societies to create a culture of data stewardship inside the science community. I mean, let's be clear, many scientists, when we did recently a poll, still consider the data as my data. And it's not a data of society, even if they have been funded through society. It's my data. And secondly, with regard to sharing of data, well, you know, perhaps, but... So we need to change that culture. There needs to be a culture of sharing data, curating data, and making data interoperable. And that's why we are calling upon all funding agencies in Europe, in the member states, but also across the globe, to really require, if they give a grant, a data management plan, where also the scientists are not only required to look after the data, but also respect the FAIR principles, findable, accessible, well, you know these things. And then, of course, we would like to go to a system that these data are then not anymore stored on local systems, where at the end of the project they disappear, and, you know, a huge issue with reproducibility of experiments, well, you know the problem, so that they are stored on certified repositories. So it's a whole process which we are going through, which is a lot of policy, and that's why I'm very grateful that you travel over to Europe to discuss this change, which is a global change, moving from it's my data to open data and to sharing of data, and to make sure that what we fund, often with public money, that these data are curated and preserved and shared. And I think there we need, I think, also to align our policies to talk about it. We can learn a lot from you, what the NIH is doing and the NSF is doing. So happy that you are coming over to see how we can do more. And certainly with regard to cohorts, I look at our colleague in cancer research, I mean, it's so essential that the big cohorts are being developed and shared.
I would actually just like to add, I want to underscore how important this is. You know, the State Department and our office shepherd many bilateral science and technology discussions. And, you know, one of the ones that comes to mind is with Italy, and how much of our discussion there focused on how do we harmonize data. You know, whether it's physics has one way of doing it and medicine has another way of doing it, and yet with the speed, the exponential speed of science, physics and medicine obviously bump up against each other, and it is so essential that we have that harmonization of data, especially as we focus on basic research, but then the commercialization and moving it to the private sector. We need to have that interoperability. So thank you for, for pursuing that.
And we'll take a final question from a Wilson Center leader.
Kent Hughes, I'm with the Global Europe program here at the center. This is really inspiring what you're talking about. And I wonder if you've looked beyond the 7 years to the area of education, preparing and inspiring the next generation of innovators.
As part of our program, we also finance research on new education systems, finance research on curricula, industrial PhD. So we do also quite a lot of work on that, because we all know that the school systems which we have today are not the school systems of tomorrow. And we need to have a complete different way at looking at education, permanent education, introducing STEM into education systems, but also our universities need to really modernize. If I look at the curricula today of many of our universities, they are the curricula which there were 100 years ago. And at the moment, for instance, our societies are crying out for data experts. But mention me one university where you can get a degree to become a data expert. And yet, these are big needs for society. Europe alone needs 400,000 data experts. They will all find a job very easily. Certainly with our economy, which is booming at the moment. The European economy is going unbelievably hard at the moment. So from that point of view, the universities need to modernize. And that's one of the points which we have also on our agenda. And we do research on education systems at all levels. So join in.
It's certainly something that in our office, STEM education, women in science, how you engage at the earliest levels. It's very personal for me. I have a 24-year-old who's a female, daughter looking for informatics master's and PhD programs, and they're very hard to find in her field of agriculture and environment. So we do need to have these university programs catch up with the needs of society.
Thank you. That was a fantastic question to close on. I personally am very excited about the topics that are open for cooperation, but especially on the cross-cutting issues, education being one, the role of data standards and interoperability, and also looking at holistic innovation ecosystems, especially considering the role of private-public partnerships and also policy levers. So thank you very much to both of you and to everyone who joined us this morning.